I'm originally a classical trained musician, so I played in the orchestra, and then I discovered music production, and I was very fascinated by the ability to create my own sonic worlds with just a computer and a pair of headphones. And also, like, improvisation became very important to me because I felt it's nice to create very well organized and well planned music, like in an orchestra, where it's also necessary. But it also great not to know what will happen. So this moment of like more a conversation with the situation or the gear or the instrument or music or people or whatever became more important to me. And another very interesting thing for me became like when I started producing music is using field recordings. So that's one of the main things I'm now doing with a project called Soundwerk, is to sample places and then create the soundtrack for those places from their own sounds. And like one thing, like within this using spaces as instruments or as musical sources, like how do you bridge the gap between the digital world inside the computer where everything is like virtual and the physical world? And I feel like there are two directions. Like one direction is to how can you get more human-like physical movements into the computer, and the other one is like how can you use the computer to create physical actions. So I like to use the Poly and Perk Pro and data machines and stuff. And I also discovered Playtronica because it's the other way around. Like there's this physical touch and this possibility to do manipulations in the real world that affect this endless space of possibilities in the digital music production world. It feels like a creative playground. Maybe that would be one of the first wordings I would come up with, because it's for all sorts of people. I feel like playground is interesting for children, but if you say playground, also creative people are interested in what could happen there. But I think it's not a toy, but more like a tool. Like you can be professional with it. Like with a hammer, you can play around, but you can also like build a house. So, but with a toy hammer, you can't build a house. So that's the difference for me. So it's more like it's a tool. So the first thing I tried to figure out before you sent me the instructions is like which color is sending which note. And actually, I just filled the whole grid in Koala and just let it play to figure out what is what. And then I knew I have 4 tracks, which is also very interesting because, for example, the new like mobile production device by Ableton also is limited to 4 tracks. So I found that very charming. This is harmonic. This is percussion and drums. This is some like more percussive ambient sounds, and this is like those animal sounds, like a bee or a sheep or a cow or a dog. Yeah. And then the interesting thing was that I couldn't remember which color is what. I could remember which ring is what, but I couldn't remember which color, so I had to try out. And also what I found interesting is that there's like each ring is kind of monophonic, of course. So if I have all my percussion and drum sounds on one ring, there can only be one percussive sound on one spot. I also figured out something about resolution. Of course, the rhythmic resolution in the outer ring is much finer than in the inner ring, which also brought me to an idea for a feature, but maybe that's for later. Yeah, so actually it's a lot about limitations, like on like till there, but then I just started playing around, and maybe I can just show. Also, I like the muting, unmuting, because I think it can be a cool performance feature. So, and I figured out that I feel much more comfortable on the lower speeds. Order layer, And I think this time I kind of more tried to control it, so it's kind of even, but of course it's not perfectly even because I placed it by hand. In the software, you start on the grid and then you might make it imperfect. And on Orbita, you make it just as perfect as you need it, but you don't go more perfect than what feels good. Yeah, so I had this. Yeah, and then we have the little animals to give some mood. So that's just what happened. The single notes are allowed to play over each other. So now the chord is playing, but also the yellow note. But when I play a chord and then another chord, so they don't play at the same time, the chords. It's the space where you don't feel time, so you don't get bored by the repetition. Feel like it could be interesting to create things, record them, and then use them as samples. It's like if you want to explain someone how a sequencer works, I think it's easier to show them Orbita than to show them this 16 by however number of things grid, because you have this loop and you understand each color means another action or sound. I like this like human thing that if something loops, you start to hear and understand the rhythm in it, and you give it some meaning. And if I can sync this randomly created loop or more randomly created loop to something more planful, that would be really interesting to marry those two approaches.